The dollar collapse will be the single largest event in human history. This will be the first event that will touch every single living person in the world. All human activity is controlled by money. Our wealth, our work, our food, our government, even our relationships are affected by money. No money in human history has had as much reach in both breadth and depth as the dollar. It is the de facto world currency. All other currency collapses will pale in comparison to this big one. All other currency crises have been regional, and there have always been other currencies for people to grasp onto. This collapse will be global, and it will bring down not only the dollar, but all other fiat currencies, as they are fundamentally no different. The collapse of currencies will lead to the collapse of all paper assets. The repercussions to this will have incredible results worldwide. The dollar is the world's reserve currency. It supports the global economy in setting foreign trade, most importantly, the petrodollar trade. This fuels our corporate vampires that acquires and harvests the wealth of the world. The corporate powers suppress real assets like natural resources and labor to provide themselves massive profits. The fascist statists, collectivist model provides the money into the economy to fund an ever-increasing federal government. That government then grows larger and larger, enriching its minions with jobs to control their fellow citizens. Finally, to come full circle, the government then controls other nations through the military-industrial complex. This cycle will be cut when the mathematically and inevitable collapse of the dollar occurs. In order for our debt-based money to function, we must increase the debt every year in excess of the debt and interest accrued the year before, or we will enter a deflationary death spiral. When debt is created, money is created. When the debt is paid off, money is destroyed. There is never enough to pay off the debt because there would be not $1 in existence. We are at a point where we either default on the debt, willingly or unwillingly, or create more money or debt to keep the cycle moving. The problem is, if you understand anything about compounding interest, we are reaching the hockey stick moment, where the more debt that is incurred, the less effective it is, and this leads us to hyperinflation. There are only two actors needed for this hyperinflation: the lender of last resort, or the Fed, and the spender of last resort, the government. These two can and will blow up the system. I believe they will wait until the next crisis and the whiff of deflationary depression before they fire up the printing presses. That crisis is coming very soon, at the end of the summer or fall. The money and emergency measures are worn out. The fact that none of the underlying problems that caused the 2008 crisis have been resolved. The only thing that has happened is that instead of corporate problems, we now have national problems. In this movie, Greece will play a role of Lehman Brothers, and the United States will play the role of AIG. The problem is there is nowhere to kick the can down the road, and there is no world government to absorb the debt yet. So this leads me to the top 5 places not to be when the dollar collapses. Number 1, Israel. This Anglo-American beachhead into the Middle East was first conceived by the most powerful family in the world, the Rothschilds, in 1917. The Balfour Declaration said that there will be a Zionist Israel years before World War II, and the eventual establishment of Israel. Israel has not been a very good neighbor to its Muslim nations, and has always had the two biggest bullies on the block at its back. When the dollar collapses, the United States will have much too much on its plate, both domestically and internationally, to worry about such a non-strategic piece of land. This will leave Israel very weak at a time when tensions will be high. This very thin strip of desert land will not be able to withstand the economic reality of importing its food and fuel, or the political reality of being surrounded by Muslims. Number 2, Southern California. The land of fruits and nuts turns into battlefield Los Angeles. 20 million people packed into an area that has no water, and thus food is not good, to say the least. Throw on top of the huge wealth disparities and the proximity to a narco state, and this does not bode well. We have seen riots from Rodney King. What will happen when the dollar is destroyed and food and fuel stop coming into this area? People will get desperate and do crazy things, especially when a huge proportion of its citizens are on antidepressants. If food and fuel cannot get in, what about Prozac? At a time when people's worlds are falling apart, they lack the ability to deal with this new paradigm. If people come off these drugs too fast, they will suffer psychotic breaks, and you will have thousands of shootings or suicides. Number 3, England. The land of the Big Brother and former empire of the worldwide slave and drug trade will suffer heavily. The stiff upper lip that the British elite ingrained into the sheeple will not work anymore as the British population explodes. The human character will sacrifice and unite for a foreign enemy, but not if the enemy has always been the elite. The Anglo-American Empire may pull off another false flag to distract its population, but I feel this collapse will happen before they pull it off. This will make all eyes point at the British elite as solely responsible for this catastrophe. We have seen massive riots for soccer matches with hooligans. What will happen when this island with very little food and fuel gets cut off? Number 4, New York City. Another large urban area living too high on the dollar hog. There is little doubt that all of the wealth in New York City, New Jersey, and Connecticut is derived off of Wall Street wealth. The savings and investments of the whole nation and much of the world flows through this financial capital. As the world wakes up to the massive financial fraud, this will lead to the destruction of capital like we have never seen before. This will have tremendous effects on the regional economy, as people driving in Mercedes suddenly wonder where their next meal is coming from. Number 5, Washington, D.C. The political collapse of the federal government will wreak havoc on the hugely inflated local economy. As more and more states find it necessary to assert their natural control, the federal government will suddenly lose power and importance as the whole world suffers from a global Hurricane Katrina. The money that they create and spend will become worthless, and the government minions' pensions will evaporate. Millions that once relied on the ability to force others to send their money to them will learn that the real power has always been at the most local level. Massive decentralization will be the answer to globalization gone mad. Local families and communities will forego spending money and power out of their community, as they will care about their next meal and keeping warm. As Ayn Rand once said, "You can ignore reality, but you cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. To sum up, those areas that have lived highest on the hog in the dollar paradigm will most likely be the worst places to live when the dollar collapses. Many of you will see this video with passing interest, but rest assured, this dollar collapse is coming. It is a mathematical inevitability. We will not be as fortunate to muddle through this collapse like we did in 2008, when it was a corporate problem. This time around, it is a national and global problem. The global Ponzi scheme has run out of gas. As the demographics decline, as cheap, abundant oil declines, as hegemonic power declines, this comes at a time when we reach the exponential or collapse phase of our money. The irresistible force paradox says, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? We are about to find out when infinite money hits a very finite world.
And 6 years thou shalt sow thy land, and shalt gather in the fruits thereof. But the 7th year thou shalt let it rest and lie still, that the poor of thy people may eat, and what they leave the beasts of the field shall eat. In like manner thou shalt deal with thy vineyard, and with thy oliveyard. 6 days thou shalt do thy work, and on the 7th day thou shalt rest, that thine ox and thine ass may rest, and the son of thy handmaid, and the stranger may be refreshed.
According to the Bible, Jews in the land of Israel must let the land rest every 7 years. In Hebrew, every 7th year is known as a Shemitah, a word that means to fall, collapse, or wipe out. It also refers to a release. This ancient mystery goes back over 3,000 years to Moses and Mount Sinai. It is interesting to mention here, many people are not aware that Moses was often depicted having horns on his head during this time frame that we are in the middle of. This rare series of blood moons falling on Jewish holy days in conjunction with the Shemitah are setting us up for an incredible year ahead that all points towards September 2015 as a time of major change as the final super blood moon takes place and the Shemitah year comes to a close on Elul 29, the final day of the biblical calendar when all debts are wiped away. Never before in history has a super blood moon of a biblical tetrad ever occurred at the end of a Shemitah year.
At the end of every 7 years, thou shalt make a release, and this is the manner of the release. Every creditor that lendeth aught unto his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor or of his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. The foreigner thou mayest exact it again, but that which is thine with thy brother thine hand shall release.
Messianic rabbi and author of The Mystery of the Shemitah has uncovered a startling connection between the Shemitah and the financial markets in the United States. Since 1973, every U.S. financial collapse has occurred during a Shemitah year, 100% of the time. In 1973, a Shemitah year marked the beginning of a stock market crash combined with an oil crisis that caused the sharpest fall in global share prices since the Great Depression and World War II. 1980, the following Shemitah year. In January, the U.S. economy entered a recession that at the time was the most significant since the Great Depression. In 1987, the following Shemitah year. Black Monday, October 19th. The largest one-day percentage decline in the Dow Jones Industrial Average had ever seen. It dropped 22.6% in one day. The following Shemitah year, 1994, bond market massacre took place with yields on 30-year treasuries jumping 200 basis points in the first 9 months of the year, hammering investors, bankrupting Orange County, and thrusting Mexico into crisis. 7 years later, on the next Shemitah year, 2001, we witnessed a collapse of the Twin Towers in New York, and a historic stock market collapse followed 6 days later. 684 points, or 7.13% drop in a single day. The largest point drop in history, and it happened on Elul 29 of the Jewish calendar, the ancient day of debt cancellation. The following Shemitah year happened in 2008, where we saw the Dow drop 777 points in a single day. September 29th, 2008 was exactly on Elul 29 of the Shemitah year, just like 2001's historic Dow collapse. Mark your calendars, everybody, and hold on to your hats, because if this trend continues, September 13, 2015 could be a doozy. People all around the world are affected in one way or another by the mystery of the Shemitah, and this coming September 2015 could just be an incredible time. Not only will we have a super blood moon, but we will also be in the end of a super Shemitah. Every 7 Shemitahs, or 49 years, bring a jubilee in the 50th year, and we are in the 7th Shemitah right now. This super Shemitah can intensify the blessing or the curse, and from the looks of the first 3 weeks of this Shemitah, we may not be in for the blessing. On the first day of the 7th Shemitah, September 25th, 2014, the first case of Ebola was diagnosed on U.S. soil when Eric Duncan checked into a hospital in Dallas, Texas. Duncan died on October 8th, the second blood moon of the biblical Tetrad. On this day, we also heard that China had passed the U.S. as the biggest economy in the world according to one key metric. In addition to the Ebola situation, the Dow Jones has also lost 1,000 points since the start of the current Shemitah on September 25th, 2014. Not to alarm anyone or spread any type of fear porn, but I think that it is important to mention that in the book, The Mystery of the Shemitah, it is revealed that the beginning of the Shemitah's impact is often subtle, but leads to a dramatic climax. America was founded by people professing Judeo-Christian values and can no way escape the power of the Shemitah. The mystery of the Shemitah manifested in ancient times, during the fall of the Babylonian Empire and the rise of Persia. In modern times, it has involved the fall of Europe and the rise of America. Along with empire building comes tall buildings. The tallest building in America in 1950 was the Empire State Building, completed in 1931, a Shemitah year. The Twin Towers were planned in 1945, a Shemitah year. Completed in 1973, a Shemitah year. And collapsed in 2001, a Shemitah year. The next economic shift in empire building appears to be pointing to China, as they just passed the U.S. in one key metric for the largest economy in the world. They have plans to start building the Phoenix Twin Towers next year, which will be the tallest in the world, and they are hard at work pushing out the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency of the world. Could September 2015 be the end for the U.S. dollar? As many of you know, Pastor Lindsey Williams predicted $150 per barrel oil price in 2007, when the price was around $70. Many people laughed at Mr. Williams and at his inside elite information. However, in the summer of 2008, it hit $147 per barrel for the first time ever. In July 2008, not long after the historic oil rise, Pastor Williams was laughed at and ridiculed once again when he took to the airwaves and said that oil was going to drop below $50 a barrel in the next 9 to 12 months. On November 21st, 2008, the price hit $49.93, and countless people who had heard his prediction just 4 months earlier were stunned. Many people were baffled, even going as far as saying that Lindsey was a modern-day prophet. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you that Mr. Williams is not a prophet, because he has told us several times that he isn't. However, what he is, though, is a man with friends in high places, and one of his elitist friends gave him this incredible information which had been planned behind closed doors. In the past several months, oil has once again started to collapse and is currently at $56 a barrel, down from $115 this past summer. Over the past couple of months, I was wondering why Lindsay wasn't able to warn us this time around. Well, a few nights ago, I got my answer. I was on lindsaywilliams.net looking for some recent information, and buried in the middle of the blog, I found a recent post by James Harkin, who runs the website. You are not going to believe this, and you may want to be sitting down. Pastor Williams has announced a regular monthly emailed newsletter. At this point, many of you are probably thinking, oh great, what's this going to run me? Well, brace yourselves, because as far as I can tell, it is going to be free. Yes, you heard me right. Free of charge. The newsletter will feature articles from Lindsay's 2 Wall Street insiders, as well as articles from Pastor Williams himself. This month, they have already posted inside information, and I will provide you with a link in the more info section of this video. Now, let's get back to the oil story and what Lindsay just revealed to James Harkin. Pastor Williams said that in the past, his elite friends have always told him before oil prices dropped. However, this time, Lindsay was not informed ahead of time because the elite did not create the price decline. Did you hear that, everyone? Someone else has grabbed the strings and is dancing around a game of Russian roulette. Without any authorization of the elite, President Obama sent John Kari to Saudi Arabia to negotiate the decline. Pastor Williams said that the elite are so angry with Obama that words can't even describe it. There are some really big problems right now between Obama and the elite. In light of everything that is happening, Pastor Williams said that everyone needs a copy of his latest DVD entitled Special Events Scheduled for 2015. On my channel homepage, you will find 2 videos that deal with some of the information in his latest DVD about blood moons and the Shemitah, and how everything seems to be pointing towards September 2015 as a period of massive change. As a side note, in support of Pastor Williams' claims, in October 2014, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro asked a rhetorical question. What is the reason for the United States and some U.S. allies wanting to drive down the price of oil? His answer? To harm Russia. Saudi Arabia may have gone along with a plan to drive down oil prices in order to punish 2 rivals, Russia and Iran, for their support of Bashar al-Assad's regime in the Syrian civil war. So what is the result of all this, many of you may be asking? Well, unless you are part of the American sheeple who concentrate on grown men throwing balls around, or program yourself with The Walking Dead, Vampire Diaries, Modern Family, or Orange is the New Black, you probably know that the Russian ruble has been collapsing as the central bank raises interest rates to 17%. After all, 70% of Russia's exports are oil and gas. Not to mention that Putin just signed a 3-year budget based on $100 oil. In Iran, they have been busy driving down a 42% inflation rate to 17% recently. But with oil so low, they may need to start inflating the rial once again.